creative when it comes to helping people to get into the project and reducing the learning curve, right? And as PyPy goes along, the learning curve is quite steep now. So we really need to think about this, and we're trying to do that as well. All this results, of course, in the actual increased team morale, you know, because if the levels are not that high and the steep curve is not there, and you feel that you can talk to the core developers really, and you get answers really quickly, that actually feels that you're allowed to participate in the community and in the project, and that makes people more interested and get them on board. So it's good for everyone. Okay. Yes, the origins of sprinting, and sprinting is the key methodology that we use for the people factor, like this leakage, this lack of physical working together. This is what we solve by sprinting. And Holger called them one-week programming meetings, and that is exactly what it is. But let's look a bit about where this comes from, and it's a fussy history, but this is what I've kind of found out so far. Like in the agile community, not the open source community and not the traditional software community, but the specific agile community, there actually is a methodology called Scrum. Yeah? And in this methodology, they work with 1 month-long iterations that they call sprints. And in this iteration, they focus on a specific increment, a specific load of work that they need to do. And they document this, they have daily meeting sessions and everything, and they document this in a kind of sprint backlog. What are we doing and when are we doing it? And they work for a month, they evaluate this iteration and this increment. Did we succeed? What we need to do, what will be the goals of the next sprint we're doing, and then they feedback that into the actual product, and then they go for the next iteration and next iteration. So these 1 month-long increments in Scrum is called sprints. Now, if you look what happened when this moved into the Python community, SOAP Foundation, actually in like 2002, around there, 2001, 2002, they made their own definitions. Because they were an open source community, SOAP Foundation used this first internally with their clients and then externally with the community for contribution. They couldn't allow 1 month-long programming sections, so they kind of did a more accelerated approach into 2 or 3 day focused development session in which developers pair off together in a room, focus on building a particular subsystem. That is the definition being used. So when you look at the Python community today, that's a typical sprint, 2 to 3 days. Now in the PyPy community, we had to evolve our own way of sprinting, and we're going to present that a bit here. So the entire project, as Holger said, started during sprints, these week-long meetings, this accelerated approach. Now, what we did, even before the project got funded, is we moved around, because we wanted a solidarity when it comes to cost, so not all people needed to travel all the time and pay for the cost. So we moved around to the different people that were willing to host us, and also making sure that they could participate, right? So it was, in that sense, it was stimulating the community building as well, right? Because people were allowed. I mean, if you wanted PyPy to come to your location, we would. You know, if you had facilities that we could use, we would be there, right? And when we got funded, we continued with this. It's a strategy. Every 6 weeks, we sprint somewhere in Europe, in the US, in Asia, as we will talk a bit about more. So some of the places we've been to sprinting is like this, yeah. Okay, so let's look a bit about what's specific for the PyPy sprints. Yeah, you can continue. Okay, so first of all, there's quite a lot of planning going into sprinting. It's not like, I mean, getting a group of people to the same place at the same time with a normal amount of cost, agreeing on what to do, having similar expectations, that takes a lot of planning. Where are we going to stay? Do we know people at that local place? Yeah. And are we going to stay at the university? What are the rough goals and activities we're going to do, right? So this actually is being planned on a developer level in the project, even the funded aspects as well. And the sprints are open for the entire PyPy community, and people outside of the PyPy community also visit our sprints as well, right? So we need to actually do this planning and do it well, and 1 month before the actual sprint, do a sprint announcement so people can plan and book tickets and see if they want to participate. And this is a picture from our sprint in Lausanne in Switzerland in January. So you can see maybe in the window there, lovely mountains, yeah. But it was a very nice little cabin, and we worked very well there and did lots of compliancy tests, if I remember things correctly. Yeah, it was really weird. This was my first sprint, and it was just lots of programmers there, and it was weird. Okay, let's continue. So, the actual doing, what happens when we do meet? Yeah, well, we have startup meetings, because when the people get together, we actually know it's around like 10 to 15 people, sometimes up to 20 people participating. Some of them are core developers, there's been there since 2003. Some of them have been to other types of sprints. Some of them doesn't know PyPy at all, but are very interested. So we need to do a startup meeting to making sure that all the goals are there and just a rough idea of what we're going to do. And then people pair off based on interest. And what we try to do is mix core developers with like junior people or people interested in PyPy, because it's about decreasing the learning curve, right? So, and then we have daily status meetings, and with the different pairs, just like, yes, we're making progress, this is a real problem, okay, and then we restructure and reshuffle and say, yeah, Christian, you need to, maybe you can help them over there, yeah, we'll do that, and, you know, and we go on like that for a couple of days. And of course, the key technique here is pair programming, but we actually involved another version of pair programming, which is group programming, because we only have so many core programmers, right? So we need to have like one of them and maybe 3 people participating. So it turned more into a discussion group that actually sat and coded together as well, right? Okay. And then we have the closing, and this is a nice picture of this summer. This was the 0.7 release. It apparently involved alcohol and some core developers, so check that release out. And this is Holger and Samuel and Richard, and this is a very good mix, because here we have people in actual companies in the consortium, but we also have people from the community, and we also have people just recently involved in the community. So it just shows the mix of PyPy, that it's not really just a consortium. It's definitely a community, and we have different roles, right? And then we do closure meetings, like, did we achieve our rough goals? What work do we need to do until the next sprint? Yeah, okay, and we don't allocate specifically who's going to do that. We just leave it out to the developers, and they continue with their PyPy sync meetings in between, right, as Holger mentioned. And then we do a sprint report, which is very appreciated, because people off location want to know what happens. What are you doing in that mountain cabin, you know? And we evaluate as well, okay? So it's not 2 to 3 days, because when we meet up every 6 weeks, we actually meet up for 7 days. And we have to have a break day in between, otherwise, you know, code wouldn't look very well. And in some sense, we had to evolve open sprints and closed sprints. Like just before a release, we kind of need people who are more into the actual PyPy code base, right? So the focus is not much on learning, but actual really tricky things that need to be done. So then we actually say, if you really want to learn about PyPy, you should come to this other sprint, in which the core developers are really there and can mentor you and everything, right? So that's why we talk about open sprints and closed sprints. And the sprints at conferences like PyCon in the US and also EuroPython, they are more tutorial. They turn more and more tutorial-like. In a sense, they're like a workshop, a programming workshop. So it's a great way of getting to know the project if you're interested. Yeah. So, and here you can see the number of subscribers. And you can see an effect here also what happens when we got EU funding. So over here, we're talking about, here's the summer, like this nice picture when they drank lots of alcohol and made the 0.7 release. Yeah, that's here. Apparently it was very creative as well. Yeah, and then we have sprints. And this is like, here, you can see EuroPython Gothenburg and start of EU funding. And then you see an actual result here. And the sprints are these meetings. And here you have, this is PyPy dev subscribers. So when we reach critical mass through the PyPy funding that we got from the EU, we could actually create so much work that the community evolved. So this is not just because we got money, it was because we could actually work focused on helping and mentoring the community. And of course it grew, right? And we invited people to sprints, and we're trying desperately to fund people to come to our sprints as well. Yeah, okay. So, the different cultures of the PyPy project. Now we're going to talk about some troubles, and because it wouldn't be realistic otherwise, right? It would all be mushy and yummy, and of course we have problems as well. This is the PyPy umbrella. Now, if you want to have a certain amount of people doing an EU-funded project, open source and agile, you need certain skills involved in the project, right? So we have people that have a strong open source Python culture perspective that is triggering them, that is their focus, right? They are used to working agile and distributed. This is their work style. This is also their values and interest, right? So we're talking about people now. And then we have people who are used to the EU project work style. And that is a separate culture, and they are driven by other perspectives and other values and have other experiences. And then we have the traditional project management culture as well. Both people who got burnt by traditional project management projects, but also knowing that there are some structures here that are actually good as well, right? And then you have the chaos pilot culture, which the company I work in come from, the action learning, trying to actually evolve processes within. And that is a new one to the community and also the project. And of course, that is our focus, and we bring that into the project. And then we also have the different national cultures, like people working from France and Germany and Sweden, and also like Brazil and South Korea and everything. So there's a whole bunch of different cultures stretching the community in different areas and also stretching the project, the funded project, focusing, fighting their different corners as well. Now, this creates problems, but also opportunities. So let's look a bit about them. Yeah. Now, in some sense, you have some kind of paradox here, because we want to have a developer-driven process, like the community was before it got funded. But we also need to have a formal project organization. How do we manage this, right? So we have to create formal structures with formal managers that weren't part of the community beforehand, that have formal roles. Like my role is assistant project manager, and we have a project coordinator and a project manager. But we also need to structure the core developers into a formal arena as well, in which they can make decisions that are formal on a project level, on a consortium level. And that is the technical board, which Christian and Holger are part of. And then we have the partners, the 7 organizations as well. They have their partner role. So Holger is not just a part of the technical board, he is also representing a partner and also has views and opinions and needs in that direction, as well as me. Now, a typical example of that is sprint organizing, because this is a key thing for the project, the EU-funded project. So in a sense, we should have one person really owning this. But that would break with tradition from how we worked previously in the community. So we still have no formal role and responsibility for sprint organizing, because it doesn't work that way. And it would be wrong to create a structure there. So that's an example of trying to balance this. And also planning and focusing on technical tasks, right? So we have our work packages, the 14 work packages, the 58 deliverables, but we also have the different needs of the community, right? So we have formal needs to deliverables, but we also have the interest-driven aspects, and we need to have a balance here. So this is a constant risk, because all this comes back to that if we want to have a developer-driven process, we have to allow the developers to actually do their work, like channeling their unique strengths, right? So in that sense, this is, of course, added work on them. Because if they want added room, they have to collaborate and organize themselves, but also integrate with the consortium level. And this is a risk, of course, yes. Another balancing problem is we want to work agile, right? We want also to conform to the formal EU requirements, because they actually fund us to do stuff, right? So we have our written high-level requirements. As Holger said, it was a good thing to do. It was good to do it. But also, we need to conform to those. But in the same time, if we feel now that, oops, there's a new Python release, we might go change our concept in a different way. We have to, the change control structures with the EU are quite complicated. It involves contractual amendments and stuff like that. It takes quite a lot of months, very unagile, okay? So in that sense, we have a constant risk of missing opportunities from within the community saying that this is more interesting now, we should go in this direction. We might agree, but we still have a contract with the EU, right? So this is also a balancing problem, yes? And then we have, of course, the actual open source community and their needs, and then you have the hierarchies for conceptual integrity. And this is a quote from Fred Brooks, The Mythical Man Month. And of course, it's over 20 years old, but it's unfortunately still actual today, right? So conceptual integrity are represented by the core developers, the architects of the idea, the person giving birth to the vision of PyPy, okay? And we can't just let it loose. They wouldn't agree that PyPy suddenly turned into some kind of COBOL implementation or something, you know? Like if the majority of the community would think like that, yeah, and we would have a conflict within the community. So this conceptual integrity is structured so that they have a formal arena in the project, and that is the technical board. Now, I've listened to some talks in this conference, and regularly I hear about projects in which the core developers didn't allow anyone to influence the process. And constantly forked because core developers weren't able to talk to the community, evolve the community, and actually listen to the community and have a balance there. So this is also a risk